Jang burst into the scene, his presence like a storm sweeping away all obstacles. His eyes, blazing with a fierce determination, fell upon the chaos before him. A girl was assaulting Shanshan with relentless kicks and blows. Without a moment's hesitation, Jang intervened, delivering a powerful slap to the girl's face that abruptly ceased her violence. The girl stumbled backward, stunned and disoriented, her mouth hanging open in shock as she tried to comprehend the sudden shift in power. Jang's glare cut through the confusion like a blade. His voice, sharp and commanding, resonated with authority as he confronted her. He seized her by the hair, yanking her close, the intensity of his anger palpable. The girl's pleas for release were filled with desperation and fear as she struggled against Jang's grip. Her screams echoed with a mix of rage and terror. Jang, his expression unyielding, drew a knife with a deliberate, calculated motion. He held it to her throat, the cold steel pressing against her skin. The girl's eyes widened, her face paling with dread as she gasped at the sight of the blade. In a swift, almost methodical movement, Jang began to cut through the girl's hair. The blade sliced through her locks, sending large chunks of hair cascading to the ground like fallen leaves in autumn. The girl's protests grew more frantic, her voice trembling as she stared at the growing pile of her severed hair. Her anger and disbelief were evident as she cursed Jang, vowing to retaliate. Jang remained unperturbed, his voice icy and detached. He explained that long hair could be a liability, his words carrying an unsettling calm. The girl's fury only intensified as she demanded an explanation, but before the confrontation could escalate further, Shanshan, who had been observing silently, spoke up. Her voice held a hint of grim foresight as she mentioned that short hair might prove advantageous in the days to come. Turning to Shanshan, who stood beside Grandpa Li, Jiang made a decisive command. He urged Shanshan to leave with him immediately. Her confusion was evident as she questioned their departure. Without answering, they all climbed into the car. As they drove away, Shanshan's curiosity was piqued, her questions about their abrupt change and plans flowing rapidly. Grandpa Li, sitting in the front seat, let out a weary sigh. He explained that a severe famine was imminent, rendering schooling a secondary concern compared to survival. Shanshan's skepticism flared as she chided her grandfather for falling victim to what she perceived as scam calls. Her playful yet exasperated tone suggested a long history of similar conversations. As they bickered, Jang's mind was preoccupied with a solemn promise. Shanshan. In this life, I will keep you safe, he vowed silently. Breaking his silence, he turned to address both Shanshan and Grandpa Li. He revealed that the information about the famine was indeed accurate and came from him. Shanshan's eyes filled with suspicion as she questioned Zhang's identity. Calmly, Zhang introduced himself as Zhang Xiaoyong, offering to be addressed as Brother Xiaoyong. The revelation took Shanshan by surprise, but her gratitude for Zhang's intervention was clear. Zhang's dismissive gesture towards the girl's attackers suggested their days were numbered, an ominous statement that only deepened Shanshan's fears. She questioned the validity of the famine, her apprehension growing as she tried to reconcile the gravity of Zhang's words with her grandfather's warnings. Zhang's gaze was fixed on the passing scenery outside the car window, his face a mask of impenetrable resolve. He finally broke the silence, his voice carrying a weight of cold certainty. He revealed that the famine story had been a fabrication, a tool to help Grandpa Li grasp the severity of their situation. Relief washed over Shanshan as she absorbed the truth. The notion of a famine in these seemingly tranquil times seemed improbable. But the gravity of Zhang's next words cast a heavy shadow over her relief. The true threat, he revealed, was the apocalypse. The word apocalypse hung in the air like a death knell, and Shanshan's initial relief was quickly replaced by a deepening sense of dread. The car, racing into the unknown, seemed to amplify the ominous tension that had settled among them. As the road blurred past, Zhang's eyes narrowed, scanning the sky as if searching for signs of an impending storm. He muttered something under his breath, a cryptic remark that left Shanshan uneasy. Turning to her, he instructed her to check her phone for short videos and news updates. He was certain that signs of the apocalypse would soon become apparent. Shanshan hesitated, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with her phone. The skepticism in her voice was palpable as she murmured doubts about the reality of the situation. But her skepticism quickly faded when a video on her feed drew her attention. The video began with a hauntingly poetic narration, a contrast to the chaos that followed.
Shanshan's eyes widened in horror as the screen showed a person, clearly afflicted with rabies, attacking others in a frenzied state.
The clip captured a chilling scene, a man ranting about a strange, acrid smog, and another individual shrieking in fear as they were bitten by a seemingly rabid assailant. The chaotic images were punctuated by the attacker's unsettling confession, "I couldn't resist. I feel terrible, take me to the hospital." Jang's voice cut through the disarray, confirming Shanshan's worst fears. The apocalypse was no mere fabrication, it was unfolding before their eyes. Shanshan's face drained of color as she turned to Jang, her voice barely above a whisper as she asked if the apocalypse was real. Jang's grim nod was a confirmation that sent shivers down her spine. Tomorrow, he revealed, would mark the beginning of a catastrophic event.
Toxic smog would engulf several provinces, including Province B.
As Shanshan absorbed the horrifying news, she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the impending disaster.
Jang explained that this smog would gradually transform a significant portion of the population into zombies.
And those who died would also join the ranks of the undead, their souls lost to the horrors of the apocalypse.
Jang's gaze locked with Shanshan's, his expression intense.
He inquired if she understood what zombies were, as if gauging her readiness for the terrifying reality they were about to face. The atmosphere in the car was thick with tension, the weight of their grim fate pressing down on them as they continued their journey into the unknown. Shanshan nodded, her expression a mixture of disbelief and resignation. The enormity of Jang's claims was almost too surreal to accept, but she could not ignore the urgency in his tone. Jang sighed heavily, the weariness evident in his eyes as he reassured her. The apocalypse, he explained, would soon become all too real, whether it began tomorrow or within the week. As the car slowed to a crawl, the traffic ahead was a tangle of frustration. The once speeding vehicle was now ensnared in a snarl of congestion. Jang cursed under his breath, his irritation clear.
"Damn, we're stuck in traffic."
Shanshan's frustration mirrored his as she glanced around.
The emergency lane, too, was blocked, leaving them with no apparent escape. Grandpa Li, seated in the front, turned anxiously towards Jang. He voiced his concern about the zombies catching up to them if they remained immobilized. Jang's reassuring smile didn't fully mask the tension in his demeanor.
His eyes scanned the road ahead, betraying a deeper unease. The thought of a possible outbreak, even a small one, gnawed at him, pushing him to press harder on the gas pedal despite the still encumbered traffic.
Without warning, a car veered abruptly into their lane. Shanshan gasped, clutching her seat as Jang slammed on the brakes.
The car swerved violently, and Jang's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles were white. His anger was palpable as he glared at the offending vehicle, cursing the reckless driver. Determined to confront the situation, Jang sped up, maneuvering to get past the car. The driver of the offending vehicle responded with a smirk and a barrage of obscenities, their confrontation escalating into a dangerous game of road rage. Grandpa Li, with concern etched on his face, urged Jang to avoid further conflict, noting the other driver's apparent wealth and power. Jang's response was a cold, dismissive chuckle. His calm demeanor masked a simmering edge of menace as he promised to deal decisively with anyone who dared to challenge him. The traffic finally began to clear, offering a brief respite. Jang allowed himself a moment of relief, only for Shanshan to shatter it with a warning. The same car from before reappeared, aggressively maneuvering alongside them. Jang's anger flared anew as the vehicle swerved ahead, overtaking them. Grandpa Li's nervous advice to avoid further trouble was drowned out by Jang's steely determination. The impending apocalypse, he reasoned, left no room for tolerance of such scum. Suddenly, the reckless car ahead crashed into another vehicle, coming to a jarring halt. The driver, livid and vengeful, stormed out and began hurling insults at Jang. With a phone in hand, the man furiously dialed the traffic police, demanding surveillance footage and a license plate number. The driver's threat was a sharp, audible challenge as he pointed aggressively at Jang's car.
The tension between the two vehicles reached a boiling point.
Jang's expression remained inscrutable, his eyes reflecting a chilling calmness as he weighed his next move amidst the growing chaos. The atmosphere in the car was charged, the looming apocalypse now mingling with the immediate danger of road rage. Jang's car rolled to a stop, and he stepped out alongside Shanshan and Grandpa Li. The cool, quiet evening air wrapped around them, casting an eerie calm as they took in their surroundings. Jang's eyes were drawn to the towering structure ahead. The sheer size of it overwhelmed him, and he muttered to himself in awe, realizing the gravity of their situation. However, his tone quickly shifted back to its usual seriousness as he reminded the others to rest, knowing that the challenges ahead would be relentless. That night, they rested, though the weight of the unknown lingered in the air. Morning came swiftly, and Jang was the first to wake, drawn to the window to survey their environment. The early light of dawn barely illuminated the landscape, giving the world a soft, quiet glow. Before long, Shan appeared beside him, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She stretched, savoring the moment of peace, relieved to not have to rush into the routine of morning classes. Jang acknowledged her presence with a nod, a rare lightness in his voice as he beckoned her to follow. Together, they observed what he proudly referred to as their fortress. He pointed out the thick, reinforced concrete walls with evident satisfaction. Outside, Grandpa Lee joined them, silently taking in the scene as Jang continued explaining the layout. The building wasn't just any ordinary structure, it was a hotel fortified like a stronghold. Jang's attention turned to the main gate, and he explained with confidence that the remote-controlled barrier, made of solid steel, was nearly impenetrable. No one, neither human nor zombie, could breach it without significant force. As they walked the grounds, Shan, still uneasy and adjusting to their new reality, voiced a question that had been nagging at her. Her words were tinged with a mix of concern and curiosity as she asked what they would do if survivors came seeking refuge. Would they be left to die? Jang's gaze hardened at the question, his voice lowering as he led them up to the balcony that overlooked the area. The view from up there was vast and foreboding, matching the seriousness of the situation. He explained the harsh reality of the apocalypse, warning them that human nature was unpredictable, and in times like these, people's darkest instincts would surface. Compassion, he cautioned, could be fatal. Grandpa Lee stood nearby, silently absorbing the weight of Jang's words, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He offered no response, only nodding in agreement as the truth settled in. From the balcony, they peered down at the empty streets below. Jang's eyes scanned the horizon as he laid out a grim but necessary plan. If survivors arrived while he was away, the buffer zone would offer temporary shelter, but under no circumstances were they to let anyone inside the fortress until he returned. Both Shan and Grandpa Lee understood the gravity of his command, responding with quiet but resolute agreement. The reality of their situation had fully set in, and there was no turning back. Jang stood tall before Shan and Grandpa Lee, his expression serious as he prepared to brief them. He declared firmly that their next stop would be the food storage, where he would explain which areas could be rationed out. Together, they walked toward what appeared to be an old supply room. As they approached, something shifted in Jang's demeanor. A faint blue glow flickered in his eye, and he muttered, almost in surprise, about the sudden activation of his power, Mind's Eye. The surge of energy caught him off guard, and he quietly noted that this was the first time it had appeared, a sign of trust, perhaps. Pointing his ring toward a nearby box, he watched as it responded, glowing softly. He resumed his explanation with a steely tone, emphasizing the critical importance of keeping weapons under their control, especially in the apocalypse. Weapons are the most important thing, Jang warned, making it clear they must never allow their armory to fall into the wrong hands. Grandpa Lee nodded vigorously, fully agreeing with Jang's assessment. Absolutely, that's a must, he echoed, understanding the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, a system notification flashed in front of Jang's vision, activating a new task, * reunite with Meng Shan. Series task former comrades activated, *. The task directive was clear, find and rescue your former comrade. Zhang Qi. A reward of 20 points was promised for completing the mission. Zhang blinked, processing the information as a faint smile played on his lips. He had been wondering how to track down his old comrades, and now, the answer had presented itself. His focus shifted back to Shan and Grandpa Lee, his voice sharp with urgency as he reiterated his instructions. Everything he had just told them was critical, and violating any of it was out of the question. His commanding tone ensured that both understood the stakes. Shan, sensing his growing urgency, looked at him curiously and asked where he was headed. Jang, without hesitation, replied that they were recruiting, needing to build up their team for what lay ahead. Before long, they were in the car, driving through the desolate streets toward their next mission. The silhouette of a KTV building loomed in the distance. Inside, the atmosphere was starkly different, a hall filled with people, some clutching microphones, others lost in conversation. Amidst the noise, a man with his arm around another offered comfort, encouraging his friend to let out his emotions if he needed to. Nearby, two boys laughed heartily, one of them playfully responding to a question about their destination with a hiccup and a slurred answer, explaining they were headed to the restroom. Laughter and teasing filled the room, with light-hearted banter exchanged about kidney problems, but outside the building, the mood was far more tense. The crowded street outside was bustling with survivors, each person on edge. Chaos erupted when a man accidentally collided with a young girl, causing her to stumble and cry out in pain. Flustered, the man immediately apologized, but before the situation could be resolved, another man, who had been walking with the girl, stepped in aggressively, kicking the man who had bumped into her. His voice was low and menacing as he demanded whether the man even bothered to watch where he was going. Jang, the man who had been kicked, grunted in pain as he staggered back. A nearby boy rushed to his side, concern etched on his face as he checked if Jang was okay. But before Jang could respond, his anger flared, and he loudly confronted his attacker, questioning the unnecessary violence. The man, already seething, snarled back, clearly insulted. It was the first time someone had dared to talk back to him, and he wasn't about to let it slide. Clenching his fists, he promised to teach Jang a lesson. As the confrontation escalated, another figure watched from a distance, irritation written across his face. He muttered under his breath about his bad luck, just recovering from a stomach flu, now catching a cold, and, on top of that, having to deal with yet another senseless fight. Tired of the constant chaos, he sighed, wondering aloud why no one ever seemed able to take a break from the violence. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, two individuals rushed between the combatants, arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to calm the situation. Their voices were pleading, urging everyone to stand down and restore some semblance of peace. The street hung in a thick silence as everyone waited to see whether their intervention would prevent the brewing conflict from boiling over. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the enraged man's voice roared through the room, filled with a dangerous arrogance. He fumed with rage, seething as he grabbed the person who had dared to intervene and stop the fight. The intervener, caught in the crossfire, turned desperately to Jang and his friend, urging them to flee quickly. The urgency in his voice was palpable, hinting at the gravity of their situation. The furious man's anger reached a boiling point as he demanded that the servers summon his boss immediately, threatening to shut down the karaoke bar in his wrath. His voice, laced with menace, cut through the room, refusing to be pacified by the servers' stammering attempts at calm. Seizing the moment of distraction, Jang and his companion bolted, rushing into another room with adrenaline-fueled haste. Bursting through the door, they found themselves amid a crowd of bewildered onlookers who turned to stare at their sudden and frantic entry. One of them, puzzled by their hasty retreat, raised an eyebrow and inquired about their rush. Panting and still recovering from their flight, the boy explained the situation. A drunken thug had tried to assault them after a chance encounter in the restroom. Jang, still visibly shaken, added that they had narrowly escaped a severe beating thanks to the quick-witted intervention of the server. The room's mood shifted as a guy, who had been sitting calmly, scoffed at their retreat. He questioned why they hadn't fought back, his disdain clear as he grabbed his phone, determined to rally their mechanical engineering classmates for a counterattack. His eagerness to escalate the situation was evident as he prepared to call for reinforcements. Jang, sensing the danger of further confrontation, raised a hand in an attempt to defuse the situation. His voice was firm yet laced with concern, urging his peers to avoid trouble and focus on the imminent graduation that loomed less than a year away. As the tension in the room mounted, the background music continued to play, and people danced, but the unease was palpable. Then, with a sudden jolt, the door slammed open. The thug from earlier stormed in, dragging a woman with bruises on her face. His followers trailed behind him, their menacing presence causing the room to fall into a stunned silence. All eyes were drawn to the intruders as the thug's sinister grin widened. He pointed directly at Jang and his friend, his voice dripping with malice as he identified them. The woman accompanying him, her voice icy and commanding, ordered the others to seize Jang and his companion. Instinctively, Jang and his friend huddled defensively, their hands moving to protect their necks as they braced for what was to come. The guy who had earlier boasted about calling for backup stood up, facing the thug with a defiant glare, challenging him to a confrontation. Without a moment's hesitation, the thug snatched a bottle from a nearby table and hurled it at the defiant figure. The bottle shattered against Chen Chang's head, sending a spray of glass and blood cascading down. Chen Chang staggered, the impact of the bottle leaving him bleeding and disoriented. Meanwhile, outside the KTV building, Zhang's car came to a stop. He stepped out, his eyes surveying the building with a smirk that betrayed a mix of amusement and disbelief. As he prepared to enter, he muttered to himself, remarking on the irony of college students still singing in the face of the apocalypse. Unbeknownst to him, the chaos inside was about to escalate further, setting the stage for a confrontation fraught with danger.
Thanks for tuning in.
If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content.
Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Have an awesome day.